Hello class, welcome back. So before we implement votes in our app, I just want to demonstrate something to you. What you see here is an entity relation diagram, or short ER diagram, of our current state of our database right now. So as you know, we have our users table, posts, subs, and comments. And of course we have our migrations table. And this as well indicates to you all the fields that are there and the keys that connect which table to which. For example, a comment is connected to a post with the post ID, and this line here denotes a many-to-one relation, meaning that a post can have many comments. You've already seen this in code form, now you're seeing it in a diagram. Now, why I wanted to do this is I want to show you how we can create votes now. So let's create that table. So let's create a votes table. Votes. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing this to demonstrate to you. Let me grab this down. And the votes are going to have two basic columns. First one will be the username, which will be a varchar, which will be the username of the user that voted. So we can take this and connect it to that users.username and say this is a many-to-one, because a user can have many votes. I don't know why this line is going through like that, but I'm just going to ignore it for now. So the other field will be the value of the vote, which is going to be either -1 if it's a down vote or 1 if it's an up vote. Now, the next column will be depending on what the model is going to be. So for example, if we want to have this votes to be connected to any model, this is going to be called a one-to-many polymorphic relation. So an example of this, we'll have two fields. One will be the model type, and this will be a varchar, and then the other will be the model ID, and this will be an integer. And for example, if this vote was on a post, we'll say model type post, and model ID will be the ID of that post. And the same applies for comments, and also if we wanted to have any other model, for example the subs, we can have that as well. So that's what polymorphic means. Now the problem, this is the perfect solution, but the problem with that TypeORM does not by default support polymorphic relations. So if we wanted to implement them, we'll have to implement a solution on our own that has this polymorphic relation. But we can already have a simple solution, which is just to remove these fields. And how do I remove them? Actually, I'm just going to rename them. So I can rename this to comment ID and make it an integer, and rename this to post ID and make it an integer, and make both of them nullable. And if this vote was on a post, I'm going to populate the post ID with that ID and ignore the comment ID. And if it's on a comment, I'm going to do the other way around. So this solution works. It's not perfect. It's not scalable if we wanted to have votes on other models, but it works for our app because we only have votes for posts and comments. So this is it for what I wanted to demonstrate. So let's go ahead and implement that using code. Before we get into anything, I'd like to remind you to smash that like button, and of course subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And let me know in the comments if you like this type of video where I demonstrate stuff before I write code, or if you just prefer to just jump into the code. Speaking of which, let's jump into it. So I'm going to switch to VS Code. First thing we need to do is we need to create our vote entity. So I'm going to go ahead and copy one of these. Maybe I'll copy the user. Yeah, I'll copy the user. And let's create a new file here called vote.ts. Paste everything there. I'm just going to remove all these fields and the before insert listener as well, and close that. So this will be called, the table will be called votes, and the class will be called vote like that. And the constructor is going to take a vote, and this will be of type vote, and replace this with lowercase v vote, and that should be fine. Now, like we said, we're going to have two columns. So the first one will be the value. So add column, and this will be value of type, number. And the other one will be the username. And this will be a foreign key. So let's do at many to one, not many to many, many to one. And this will return a type of user, which we need to import. So let's do control space and hit enter. And same thing for the many-to-one hook or decorator. And here let's say at join column and import that. And here let's give it some options. So the name will be username, and the reference column name will be username as well. And here we'll say user of type user. And underneath that, we're going to say column user username as well, so that it's exposed to the response. And that's of type string. Let's also add the relations to the post and the comment models. So we'll say at many to one, and this will return a type of post, and this will be post of type post. And let's import that, and let's duplicate this one more time and make this a type of comment, and this will be comment, and that will return a type of comment. And let's import that as well, make sure everything is imported. And bcrypt, we're not going to need that, we're not going to need these for now, and also these validators, so remove all of that, and also the exclude, remove that, and save. And we can go ahead and set up the other side of these relationships. So we can go to comment, and here we'll say at one to many, and this will return a type of vote. Let's import that. And on the reverse relation, we'll say vote, then this will be vote.comment. And here we'll say votes, and this will be a vote array. Let's copy this and head over to the post model. So post, entity post, and here we can paste that there and import the vote model or the entity. So save this. And now we need to create this table. So let's create the migration first. So in the terminal, I'm going to stop my server. I'm going to say npm run TypeORM migration or migration generate, and let's do --n, and we'll call this create votes table. Hit enter. Cool, now it's created. We need to run it. So let's say npm run TypeORM migration migration run. Hit enter. Cool, now that it's run, we know that our votes table has been created. So now let's go and create the route that allows the user to vote. Now, there are many ways we can do this, but I wanted to make the whole route into one route instead of just having a vote route for comments and one for posts. We can combine the logic into one route. So let's open our Explorer. I'm going to create another file here inside the routes, and I'm going to call this misc.ts. And this is shorthand for miscellaneous. This will be like a collection of routes that don't have to do with anything, like they're not specific to posts or subs or users. They're just some general extra routes that we need in our app. And before we write anything here, I'm going to go to the server TS and include them. So here I'm just going to duplicate this line and say misc, or actually lowercase, misc routes from misc, like that. And then I'm just gonna duplicate this, and this will be /API/misc miscellaneous routes, like that. So save that. Let's go back to our misc.ts. So let's import the router from Express. So import router from Express, and here we'll say const router equals router, and we can export default router. And here we need to put our route first. So we'll have one route for now. So router.post, and this will be to/vote. And this will need the auth middleware. So let's import that, and this will be called just vote. So let's separate these two imports, and let's create that handler. So const vote equals async, async, and this will take a request of type request, request, and a response of type response. Import both of them and then do an arrow function. So here we're going to get a couple of things from the request body. So let's the dob, and we're going to destructure the identifier, and also the slug, and also I'm going to destructure the comment identifier, and the value. So the way I designed this is that we're going to have an identifier and a slug for the post, so we can use them to fetch the post. And then if we do have a comment identifier in the body, we're going to use it to know that, okay, we need to put a vote on a comment. So this will tell us whether we want to add a comment vote or a post vote. And these will be from the request.body. And the value is just the value of the post. So here, what we need to do, let's say first validate the value. So we need to validate vote value. I'm just going to say here, do an array. So our values are going to be either -1 or 1 for voting, or it can be also 0. So if a user has already upvoted something and their current vote is 1, and if they want to reset that vote to like remove that vote, they can send a value of 0 and we'll detect it and just remove that vote from the database. So we need to check that the vote value needs to be either -1, 0, or 1. So what we can say, we can do not, and then do an array of -1, 0, and 1, and then we'll say dot includes. If it doesn't include the value from the input, we're just going to return res.status 400 for bad request, and say .json, and we'll have an error for the value and say value must be -1 or 0 or 1, or maybe these say or like that. So if these are valid, if it's a valid value, then we'll do our try catch block. So here let's say catch, should I use the snippet, but okay, error, and if we have an error, we're just going to return res.json or res.status 500.json, and we'll say error, something went wrong. Let's console log the error as well. So console log error. So in the try catch block, because we know we have our auth middleware here on this route, that means we have a user, because otherwise, of course, if a user is not logged in, they can't vote on anything. So here we can extract that user. We'll say const user, and let's give it a type as well of user, so that we will know what we're dealing with, and import that equals res.locals.user. And here I'm going to fetch that post, so that we'll say let post, and you'll see why later why I'm using let. Equals await post dot find one or fell, and we'll pass it the identifier and the slug. And I'm okay with it saying something went wrong if we don't find that post with the identifier and the slug, because we're not going to do some very detailed error feedback on the client side if the voting fails, because it shouldn't fail if it's done through the UI anyway. So let's also here say let vote, and we're just going to give it some type. We're just going to declare it without initializing it. We'll say this will be of type vote or undefined. And we're going to do the same for the comment. So we'll say comment, and this will be of type comment or undefined. Let's import both the entities, so vote and comment. Now here, I'm gonna say if comment identifier. So let's open our code block here and then say else. So here let's put a comment, and we'll say if there is a comment identifier, find vote by comment. Now why I'm saying find vote is that this will work if we already have a vote. It doesn't have to be a new vote. If we already have a vote and we send a new value and that vote exists, we should as well change the value of the existing vote. So we need to check for that as well. So here we'll say comment equals await comment dot find one or fail as well, and we'll find by the identifier. So identifier, and this will be comment identifier. And here we'll try to find the vote as well. So we'll say vote equals await vote dot find one, and then we'll pass it the user, and we'll pass it the comment. Because this is a comment identifier, we're trying to find a vote that is associated with this comment, so we pass it like that. Otherwise, if there is no comment identifier, let's just try to find the vote that is by this user on this post. So we can add a comment here and say else find vote by post. Now that we have the post and the vote potentially, if it exists, then we need to do a couple of things. Depending on the value of the vote and depending on the state of the vote object, we're going to do a bunch of things. So first we're going to check if the vote does not exist. So if not vote, and also and value equals 0. So let's put some comments, because this is better to put comments here because it's a bit complex. And don't worry, this is the most complex thing that we're going to do throughout the entire series. So it's not going to get more complicated than this. So here what we're going to say, we're going to say if no post, or not post, if no vote and value equals 0, return error. Because if we don't have a vote and the value equals 0, what are you voting 0 on? There is no post, there's no vote to reset. So here we'll say return res.status 404.json, and here we'll say error, and we'll say vote not found. Here we'll say else if not vote. So now if we say else if not vote, that means the value is not 0. and it has to be either -1 or 1 because of this check here. But there is no vote. So here we need to create a new vote with that value that was given. So here we'll say vote equals, and here we use the let so we can assign this again. Of course, if there's no vote, that means none of this have found a value for vote. It's still undefined. So we can say vote equals, and now let's create it. We'll say new vote, and we'll pass it an object with the user and the value. Now, here we still don't know if this vote is on a comment or on a post. So we can simply say if comment. So if we did find a comment, that means we're trying to vote on a comment. We'll say vote.comment equals comment. And we could say the same for post, or actually we could just say else, because that's the only other possibility. Else we'll say vote.post equals post, and remove that, and we'll say await vote.save. So now we created the vote. So actually let's add a comment here, and we'll say if no vote, create it. Now here we can say else if. With any else if after these two, that means our value is not is either -1 or 1, and it means also that the vote exists. So the rest of these else if statements, meaning that we are updating the vote that exists already in the database. So we can already check for the or actually we need to check first for the value if it's 0. So we'll say else if value equals 0, then here we need to reset the vote. We'll say if vote exists and value equals 0. Actually we remove it. So remove vote from DB. So here we can say simply await vote dot remove. Remove like that. Now else, or actually else if as well, else if vote dot value equals, or not, actually no, does not equal value, meaning that we already have a vote, but the value that was given to us, this new value, has changed. So we just need to update the value of the existing vote. So we'll say if vote and value has changed, update vote. So here we can say vote dot value equals value, and we'll say await vote dot save. I know you wrote a lot of code and it's a bit complex, but if you go ahead and give it another read, you'll understand what is happening here. And by the way, these conditional statements, they don't cover everything. There's one use case that is missing, which is when the vote exists and the value is exactly the same, and I on purpose missed it, because in that case you don't do anything. If it's the value is the same, you just return the data. You don't update anything on the database. So now what I want to do as well after this is I want to refetch the post along with the comments and the votes and send it back to the user. So we can say here, we can refetch it and say post equals, and this is why I said let up here, so I can bind it again, assign it a new value. So we'll say await post.find, we could just say we'll find 1, because we don't say or fail, because it's not gonna fail here because it didn't fail up there. So we'll say find 1, and we'll pass it options, or like identifier and the slug that we were given up there. And I'm gonna fetch the comments as well. So we'll say relations, and we'll pass an array with comments. Or actually this needs to be an object for the options. And let's actually get the votes as well. Oh, and the sub as well. So we'll get the sub and the votes. Wait, have I added that relation? Let me check. Yeah, okay, we added that earlier, so we don't have to worry about it. So let's go back here. So we are fetching the post and fetching the comments and the sub and the votes of that post. Okay, why is it having a run on? Oh, it says here type post / undefined is not assignable. Oh, interesting. It's not assignable to post because this has to be a post because of find 1. So we can actually still use or fail here, because that returns a post, post or undefined. So let's just say find 1 or fail there. And now we can simply say return res.json and just pass that post there. So save all of this and make sure that the server is still running. Actually, I forgot to run it again. Let's run it, npm run dev. And I know I have some posts, but I don't think I have comments. So I'm just gonna create another comment. Let's open postman. So I'm gonna log in again, and let's go to posts, and then let's actually read the posts. So I have the second post. I'm gonna comment on the second post. I'm gonna grab the identifier, and go to comment on post and paste that identifier, and this is second underscore post, and here I'm gonna say nice post and add some exclamation marks and run that. All right, so now we have a comment. I'm gonna vote on, I already have the route here, so this vote route, so /misc/vote, and that's a post request. And in the body, we're gonna have the identifier, which I copied earlier, and the slug will be second underscore post, and the value is 1. And let's actually test the validation first. Let's give the value of 2. There we go, we get value must be -1 or 0 or 1. Let's test when we, let me check. So here, let's test when we don't have a vote and the value is 0. So this, like that, we should get the error. Cool, we get vote not found. Now, we should now hit this block, which is when we don't have a vote, when we have a valid value, and we should create that vote. So here, let's give a value of 1 and run that. There we go, we get that post back, and we get the comments, and we get the votes, but it's empty. So let's check why this is not working. So let's go back, go to post. Okay, I know why, because here I put vote.comment. Actually, no, the inverse relation should be vote.post. So save that. Let's go back to Postman. And now if I send this, now this is a different use case, which is when the value hasn't changed. So it just goes through and it doesn't go through that if statement or those conditionals. So now if we go down, we see there is a vote here and it's by John and it has a value of 1. Cool. Let's actually change it to -1 and send that. All right, that was successful. And now we have a vote by John and it's -1. Nice. And now if we send 0, it should delete that post. All right, so that's successful. And now we don't actually have a vote at all because it actually deleted it from the database. Cool. So our voting mechanism is working perfectly. Let's check if it's working for comments. So I'm going to grab this identifier of this comment, which is here, this VI whatever. Copy that and go here and say comment identifier and paste that in, put a comma and send this request. All right, cool. So we don't get a -1 vote on the post itself, even though we already had one. So if we change this to 1 and remove the comment identifier, it should now vote on the post itself. And it does. So now the value is 1. If we go back to VS Code and we check our database, we see that there is a vote on the comment, which is -1, and now there's a vote on the post, which is 1. Cool. So our voting route is working perfectly. Now, one thing that I want to add to it is when we are in the view, in the actual next page, when we get the posts, we need to also get the vote score and also the comment count. We need to know how many comments there are without having to do that on the client side. And also we need to know the score of the votes. So if a lot of people, for example, voted 1 and then one person voted -1, we want to do that maths on the server and then send back just the vote count, because if we want to do that on the client, it's going to slow down the client and it's also going to expose some vote data maybe that we don't want to expose. So let's do that. So let's go back to our code. I keep going back to Chrome again. So let's go to our post model. So here we're going to add another virtual field here, and let's say here at expose, and this will be a getter. So let's say get, and let's call this comment count. And this will return actually it's a function because it's a getter, and this will return, and actually not a string, a number. And here we'll say return. This will simply be this dot comments dot count, not count, sorry, length. And comments can be nullable, so let's add a question mark here. And as to the vote score, let's here add another one, so add expose, and this will say get vote score. And this function, and this returns a number as well. Here we can use the reduce function. So we'll say return this dot votes, and this as well can be empty, so or like nullable. We'll say question mark, and we'll use the reduce function. So dot reduce, and here we'll get both the current, actually the previous values first. So we'll say previous and current cur, and we'll say we'll return the previous plus, and we can put this as an expression, or we'll say the current dot value or 0, just in case this has a null value for some reason or anything like that, and the initial value will be 0. So now this will tally up the votes and count them and return the score for us. So save this, And let's have a look at our return result now. So run this. So now let's scroll down. We see that the comment count is 1, which is correct, but we will have 1 comment, and the vote score is 1. And if we change the vote to -1, we will get that the vote score is -1. And if we log in as Jane, for example, okay, we have John123, so I'm just gonna log in with that. Log in, and now I'm gonna vote maybe 1 and vote. All right, so now we get we have 2 votes. So by John -1 and by John123 1. So the vote score is indeed 0 because that's the sum of these. And if we say -1, now the votes should be -2. Cool. So it's counting the vote score and it's counting the comment count perfectly. Now let's hide the votes because we don't want to expose this. Maybe we don't want our app to show other people who voted on which post and what did they vote. So we can simply go back to our code and go to our votes. So up here we can just say at exclude, not expose, exclude, like that. Save that, and now if we vote, we get the vote score, but we don't get the votes themselves. Cool. Now one last thing that I want to add to this is when you are logged in on your Reddit and you see a post that you upvoted, you need to know whether you upvoted it or not, or you don't just see the vote count or the vote score. So this is better done on the server, so let's do that. So I'm going to go back to the post model or entity, and I'm going to add here a function. Actually, it's going to be similar to this. So we're going to have a protected field, and let's call this user vote, and this will be a number, but we don't get it after load because we can't pass fields to after load. So instead, we're just going to make it a regular function, and we'll call this set user vote. And this will actually take a user of type user because we're going to call it manually. So here inside of there, we need to check the votes that are submitted to this post and also the votes that this user submitted, and we need to find an intersection between them. And actually, let's make sure that our user entity has a votes field, which it doesn't have right now. So let's add that. So it's almost identical to the one-to-many here. So just duplicate that, and this will return a type of vote, and this will say vote, return vote.user, and here this will be votes of an array of votes, and import that. So that's imported, so save that. And now here inside the post, let's find the index of that vote. So we'll say const index equals this dot votes question mark dot find index, and we'll find the index of the vote where vote dot username equals this user that was passed. So user dot username. So now that we have that, we'll say this dot user vote equals, so if index is bigger than -1, that means it exists. We'll say, so let's do a ternary operator and say this dot votes index dot value. Else if it does not exist, then it's 0. Because if we don't have a vote, then we're just going to show as if we haven't voted yet. So save that. And actually we're going to do the same thing for the comments. So let's go to the comment entity and add this as well. So we're going to have a user vote, and we're going to do the exact same logic to get whether this user has upvoted this comment or not. Now if we go back to our misc.ts, here we could scroll down where we refetch the post here. Before we do that, or after we do that, we can say post.set user vote, and we pass it this user. And also we're going to say post.comments.forEach. We're going to loop through them and set the user vote on each one of them. So we'll say for each comment, we're going to say comment.set user vote, and we'll pass it this user that we have. But for this to work, these comments need to have the votes as well. And to fetch them, we can use this notation, and we'll say comments.votes, which is a really easy way for us to tell the query to also fetch the comments and fetch the votes of the comments, which is really, really useful. So now that we've done this, let's save, and now we should have our post with the vote that we submitted as us, and also the same thing for each comment. So let's check out the result. So let's change this vote to 1 and submit this. All right, so now we get our post and we get our comments, and inside the comments we also get the votes because we just added we added this comment.votes. So we go here, we'll see that inside the comment, if we collapse that, we said that the user vote is 0 because we haven't voted on this, only John has. Remember, we are John123 right now. And on the post itself, we have a user vote of 1. And if we change this to -1 and we send it, our user vote will change to -1. Cool. So now we're getting what this user has voted on the comments and on the post itself. And by the way, we can hide these votes from the comments as well. So let's go back to our code. Inside the comment here where it says votes, you can say @exclude and save. And now if we run this, we will get the exact same result. Okay, let's run it again because it didn't restart properly. We get the exact same result, but inside the comments we get the user vote, but without the votes themselves. All right, so that was a lot of complex code, I know, but this is as complex as it gets, and the complexity is now behind us. We can deal with easier things like going to the client side and implementing the vote UI portion of the things. All right, so if you've learned anything in this video and if you found it really helpful, please do make sure to like this video. I really appreciate it. It helps a ton. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Just subscribe and hit the bell button. You don't want to miss these amazing videos, and I don't want to miss your beautiful face. All right, thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.